what is the purpose of school? And it really is not to prepare kids for you. It's not to prepare kids for what our current realities are outside of high school or middle school, because a lot of our kids are actually 5, and the world's going to look a whole hell of a lot different in 20 years.
I think that leaders really, when navigating this leadership journey, there are decisions that are difficult to make that might be not 100% aligned, but you just want to encourage everyone one step at a time.
I'm sure most of you have heard of the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And I think that in essence is the big difference. It's how as a leader you navigate that.
I think we all need to recognize that the new world requires new learning. And it requires new measures of success, both for what is considered a good or great score, as well as what makes a good student or good learner.
Hello and welcome to the Education Vanguard podcast. I'm Justin Harpin. Today we continue our conference takeover from the 21st Century Learning Conference in Hong Kong. This panel discussion, Leadership for an Uncertain World, brings together 5 experienced educational leaders who tackle some of the biggest questions facing schools today, from navigating global crises to political polarization, to rethinking innovation, embracing AI, and supporting teacher well-being in a relentless pace of change. Chaired by Dr. Howard Stribbell, the panel features Dr. Roukema from Hong Kong International School, Nooraine Fazal, founder of Adventure Academy in Bangalore, Dr. Shirla Sum from Victoria Shanghai Academy, and Dr. Arnett Edwards of the School Leadership Academy and Benedin School in Guangzhou. So we've got a lot of doctors on this panel, as was remarked during the opening. It's a candid, practical, and at times deeply personal conversation about what it really takes to lead schools through uncertainty. Let's dive in.
I really have the pleasure of leading this panel. You know, this day and age is tremendously different than it was when we were students. And it's tremendously different than probably when we started our careers. And so it's a real opportunity for us to lean into these leaders. I wanted to say well-seasoned leaders, but it means you've had the experience, you face the crises and the changes, and I believe you have lots that you can share with our participants today. You know, education has always been involved to some level with uncertainty, but the pace and the complexity of change today is really unprecedented. We know that technology is shaping learning. Ron and I were just talking about PhDs and doing PhDs. I think we need to distinguish pre-AI PhDs and post-AI PhDs. AI is changing a lot of what we're doing, and I know there's lots of sessions today about AI. Now, we look at global conflicts, political polarization, economic instability. This is all part of the daily news. And right now, you know, as you all know, it's happening more and more. And even outside that, students themselves are changing. I don't know about you, but it looks like it's hard to grow up as a teenager in this day and age. They have constant connectivity, social media pressure, and they have a level of global awareness that we've never seen before. And unfortunately, every one of their bad decisions is documented on social media. So for school leaders and teachers, the question is not whether change will happen, but how do we lead through it? How do we guide our communities through uncertainty while staying grounded in purpose? How do we respond to disruption without losing sight of what really matters? And how do we support the adults, the teachers and the staff in our communities as they're trying to do meaningful work and navigate this rapidly changing landscape? So that's exactly what this panel is about. And we're very fortunate to have leaders who bring very different perspectives from across international education. They've led schools through moments of change, complexity, and uncertainty. And so today we're going to explore some of the decisions that they made, the lessons they've learned, and what they believe leaders need to focus on for the years ahead. I'll introduce each one of our speakers one by one. I'll kind of give you their official CV, and then I'll let them introduce themselves for a minute or two. And then we'll go through a series of questions. We won't all five of us answer every single question, but we'll play back and forth on some of the questions. And then I want to open it up to you, the audience, as well, to ask questions that you may want to have answered. And I would just ask that you direct your question to one or two of the speakers, not just put it out there open-ended, unless you're not sure who should best answer it. But let me introduce our speakers for you. To my immediate right is Dr. Roukema. I even asked him before him, but I am the bestest never. Dr. Ron Roukema, head of school at Hong Kong International School. He's the interim head of school, and he's held senior leadership roles at HKIS since 2014, including upper primary principal, provost, and head of school. He previously led Marymount International School in Paris and held principal positions at Shanghai American School and in North Carolina. He holds an Ed.D. in educational leadership from North Carolina State University and brings extensive senior leadership experience across international and American schools. Ron, thank you so much for joining us. Maybe just introduce yourself quickly.
So yes, I'm from North Carolina, so I don't know, maybe the only active administrator on this panel that taught both and was an administrator in public schools in the U.S. As well as internationally. Been international close to 20 years and have been an administrator now for 27. So been in administration a long time. I'm one of those pre-AI doctors. I have 3 children and a wonderful wife here in Hong Kong.
Great, thank you, Ron. It's my pleasure to introduce Nooraine Fazal. Nooraine is the founder and managing trustee of Adventure Academy in Bangalore, which is ranked as India's #1 K-12 school for the last 3 years. An educationalist, entrepreneur, and a sports person, she champions purpose-driven, people-first leadership in education. Through initiatives such as Our Voice, Changemaker Challenge, Entrepreneurship, and the Alliance for the Right to Learn, she works to amplify student agency, child safety, and more inclusive learning systems. Her work reflects a deep belief that leadership in uncertain times must center empathy, responsibility, and the courage to build institutions that expand opportunity for all. Nooraine, welcome to Hong Kong and welcome to the panel.
Thank you. It's great to be back in Hong Kong. I guess what you don't know about me is I'm actually a permanent resident of Hong Kong. I came here in 97. I left in 2003 to go out and explore the world a bit more. And through my exploration, I decided I wanted to go back to India to establish education institutions. So I was one of those kids who didn't want to go to school, didn't want to comply. I remember I used to be dragged along to school, kicking and screaming and crying as a child. So ever since I remember, I want to do something which brings more beauty into the world, more truth, more justice, and to create something from start to finish. And that manifested in Venture Academy, which is really my life's passion and purpose. And I think I say this for to my colleagues who are sitting here as well. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Great, thanks,
Thank you.
Nooraine. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shirla Sum. Dr. Shirla is the secondary school principal at Victoria's Shanghai Academy, who had a lot of nominations last night at the GBA Awards and a very loud table. So that was a great culture. Shirla is originally from Hong Kong and is the secondary school principal at VSA. Before moving into education, she worked as an economist on Wall Street and later founded a design and innovation center for youth in Suzhou, China. At VSA, she is committed to fostering innovation and bilingual education to better prepare students for a global future. Welcome, Shirla, to the panel.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Such an honor to be here. As mentioned, I was born and raised in Hong Kong, very much grew up the Hong Kong local public school system before getting a chance to go to Canada to study the IB diploma program. I've actually only worked in IB schools. So I think it's also because of my background. I think that moving from a Hong Kong local school to study the IB really transformed my view on education. So it's such a privilege to be working in a school that I love working in. It's great to be in Hong Kong because I worked in previous schools in mainland China, but it's really nice to be back home now. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Shirla. And the last person on our panel is Dr. Arnett Edwards. Dr. Arnett is the founding director of the School Leadership Academy, where he is dedicated to empowering educators in Asia and beyond through leadership development. Previously, Dr. Edwards served as the principal of Li Po Chun United World College in Hong Kong from 2011 to 2023. And then in addition to his role at the Academy, Dr. Edwards currently serves as the honorary executive supervisor for Benedict Schools in Guangzhou, China. And so like me, he's used to doing back and forth on that train between Hong Kong and Guangzhou, where he further contributes to educational leadership and development in the region. And thank you, Arnett, for joining us here today.
Thank you, Howard, and thank you, audience. Yeah, again, very humbled to be asked to be on this panel. I think when Howard introduced himself at the for the keynote, I was reflecting on my time in education. Actually, I think it was even longer. Well, I started in education way back in the UK, way back in 1983. So I think that does mean the longest. Been in Hong Kong since 1998, so 1 year after you arrived, and been working in 3 schools in Hong Kong, 2 ESF, and then 1 I was fortunate to be a principal at Li Po Chun World College. And now I've got one hand this hat, as was already been said, about School Leadership Academy. But secondly, now I'm overseeing this big school project in Guangzhou at Benedict Schools, which will be 3 schools on 1 campus. It's quite an extraordinary project, and again, humbled to be asked to do that work.
Great, thank you. I should say I was in education in 1983. Yes, I was in 4th grade.
Speaking of humble, I'm wondering what I'm doing on this panel. I'm surrounded by 4 doctors. Thank God for AI, right? Maybe I can get one.
Great. Well, let's get started with some questions. Ron, I'm going to address this first question to you. When global crises dominate the news, wars, political instability, economic anxiety, how should schools respond without becoming political and really taking advantage of us being international organizations?
So for me, this has evolved through my career. And I firmly believe teachers always have to take themselves into the classroom as an authentic being. But I also firmly believe that it's the school's role to teach children how to think independently. So those two often come into conflict, especially when there's global situations occurring, because we bring our opinions with us as educators, and we have to be really careful about that. Nothing gets highlighted more than alienating students or beliefs or children because of your view that you say kind of flippantly, like, oh my God, I can't believe X did Y, to all of a sudden now the students say, well, they don't believe in what I believe in, and this is a problem. And having worked in Christian schools and education, I firmly believe we don't make children pray. We don't make children convert into anything because we don't know what their values are at home. And that, I choose that as an example because often it's easy to say a war in Iran or a war in Afghanistan or a war in Ukraine. We can choose any war, right? And there's always in our international context going to be kids who grew up on both sides of that. So as soon as we say one's right or one's wrong, we then place judgment on them and their beliefs. So how do we as educators then bring out the questions? What do you believe? Why do you believe it? What are those skills, as we were talking about earlier this morning with the former, I just know her as Helen. Sorry, as Helen was talking earlier this morning, is how do we give them the voice and ability to learn the skills they need? And I think that's a key in education that we often overlook by making knee-jerk comments about our beliefs as educators.
Yeah, good example talking about religion, because sometimes it's easier to be more apolitical talking about wars and stuff, but something as deep as religion, really, and that's part of the school's mission as well. But very good perspective. Any of the other panelists want to say?
Yeah, just meant to add, basically, I think from my experience coaching when I was there, and about UWCs, we had over 80 different nationalities on campus. And one of the challenges I had was during the social movement here. All right, so when we had the social movement, obviously there were so many different perspectives. Right. But otherwise, I remember standing up when the students first arrived, and I said, we have to work together here. We all have different opinions. There's one word which is, if you know me, I often sign off on, in peace. And that was enabled us to focus on the word peace enabled us to navigate this. And one of my proudest moments when I was principal was to have a gathering of all students together who had very different opinions of what should happen in terms of Hong Kong, but we did it in a peaceful way. Why? Because we had protocols essentially established of how we have these difficult discussions. So for me, peace.
If I may add, because I'm a UWC graduate, I went to the United World College in Canada. That's when I studied the IB. As a student, I would tell you that that's the most transformative experience, to engage in that difficult dialogue, to learn to listen. You don't have to agree, but listen to other people's perspectives respectfully. I think that was a fantastic education experience.
Excellent. Actually, Shirla, I'm going to hand you the next question. You talked about the IB and how transformative it was for you. But we also know the IB has very, very high expectations. And as school leaders, we're all trying to get a little higher average mark so we can put it on our website. But how should leaders balance academic rigor with the growing expectations around mental health and well-being?
Thank you. I think that's a very important question that we grapple with it on a daily basis. I think the message that we have to send as an institution is that balancing academic rigor and mental health well-being is not a trade-off. In fact, mental health and well-being is the strong foundation for academic excellence. And we have to keep on communicating that to parents, to all the different stakeholders. Yeah, we are a very academically rigorous school, and we get a lot of questions, especially students that get 45. Because that's just crazy to be able to get the 45. And they ask that, what do you do? How do students get 45? And I can tell you, talking to these students who managed to get the perfect score, they're not especially smart. Of course, they're great and fantastic, but it's really about the mental resilience. When you walk into the May final exams, to be able to show everything you know to the examiners. It's all about your mental state. They all know their stuff. But how do you perform in such a high stress environment? And that's because we really focus on that mental resilience. We actually at school, we have lots of different initiatives to get to just think about how to take care of themselves. We even, for the DP students, whenever they have mock exams, after the mock exams, we organize a trip to Ocean Park and go, you got to decompress. Everyone decompress, have fun, to take care of yourselves. Sleep is another one. They gotta sleep. If you don't sleep, there's no way you're getting a 45. Are you like that message is really important. And I think what is also encouraging now is that we're seeing more student-led initiatives in this space. That finally we're seeing that the students are finally getting it, because they are starting clubs and initiatives about art therapy, about sports for well-being. So I think it's very encouraging to see the students really taking initiative in these activities and really being role models about that.
Yes, Dara.
I'd just like to add to that. I think we all need to recognize that the new world requires new learning. And it requires new measures of success, both for what is considered a good or great score, as well as what makes a good student or good learner. And we as schools need to create opportunities for children to find out what they're good at and really excel. So it could be the sports field, it could be acting, it could be you're a great musician. I don't understand why schools just celebrate kids who top the class or who get 45. I'm not saying your school does that. It's celebrated by many different successes. I'm sure you do. But my point is, as an education system, I remember when we first started in Venture Academy, I constantly struggled with finding heads of schools who recognize the importance of creating this kind of culture and environment. And I find that, PE class would be canceled, our school production would be rescheduled because some exam was coming up or kids were behind portions. So I think we really need to change that. Because if you look around, I don't know, perhaps in this room it would be different. But if I look at the kids I went to school with, the kids who top my class are not necessarily the ones who are quote unquote successful in the wider world. So I really think we need to look at success very differently. It's not just about getting great marks or your your bank balance or the college you get into. It needs to be beyond that.
Yeah, I think internally as leaders at schools, we know that. We celebrate the arts, the athletics alongside the academics. We want every kid to reach their full potential. But then we also have to meet parent expectations. And parents want those high marks, those university acceptances. I think sometimes they choose our schools because they do want something different. They want their child to be happy and fulfilled. But it is a battle.
Right. But my point is we have to walk that talk and we have to educate our parents and create that ecosystem.
And again, going back to Helen earlier, it's about courage. I remember that. So the joke, if you know Hong Kong, is that this is my 10th year as interim head at school. So it's a title more than anything else. Interim head, yes, because I'm able to make changes as we go through. And I think when we look at the actual need that has to happen in schools, I went to my board probably 7 years ago and said, we're going to change our grade point averages. We're going to get rid of them. And they all looked at me. So we're getting rid of honors courses. We're getting rid of them. Why? Why would you get rid of them? Because it's better for kids. We got rid of grading in high school. We went to mastery learning. And that's a big, bold move. The outcome is, and even for KPIs, I told the board, we're going to remove the KPIs of how many kids scored a 5 or how many kids got into Ivy League. And we're going to change the KPI to who got into the top 3 choices, not their parents' choices, but the kids. So we're going to interview the kids and find out where they really want to do and tell them those are the right schools for them. And then say, you're successful when you get in those. And I think that's the mindset and shift that has to happen. And it goes with the courage because we are the leaders and we have to lead that out. And it gets scary because I have 3,100 students with about 50,000 different opinions about Ivy League. And we have to convince them that that's not right for them.
Yeah, that's
By the way, that's what our KPI reads, top 3 choices.
excellent. I like that. That's a really good way to do it. Let's shift just a little bit. Arnett, you mentioned the social movement that occurred in Hong Kong. And since that time, we can look at how much Hong Kong has changed as well. What feels most uncertain about educational leadership right now compared to 5 or 10 years ago?
Great question. I'm sure most of you have heard of the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And I think that in essence is the big difference. It's how as a leader you navigate that. Concrete example now, I'm working in China, all right, leading this project. I've been basically doing this project for 1 year. I knew nothing about the education system in China, the CNC, etc. All right, so I was going into one uncertainty. All right, it's very ambiguous in terms of understanding what we can do, what we can't do, how does compliance work, etc. So you're looking at that. Is volatile, as we know, in terms of the work, in terms of our situation, particularly in China, the falling birth rate, which is happening rapidly, and how we therefore respond to that. Okay, and there is, as I said, so much that is ambiguous, all right, in what you are doing, and I think the importance that Dr. Helen was saying earlier about purpose is really, really important, that we've got to really focus on what our purpose is. I think my second point, again, I'm going to build on something else that was said earlier in the keynote, was system. I think the other challenge which leaders now have is how do you navigate the system? I've got even in China, it's not one system. It's not even Guangdong system. I'm also learning that it also goes down to district, right? And understanding what makes that work. So that's one really important aspect. We're all part of perhaps an exam system, IB, etc. So understanding how you navigate that part of the system. When I was at UWC, it was that was 18 schools. How do you navigate that system? All right, what your role is in terms of that. When I do some of the middle leadership work, we talk about system leadership, because I think even as a middle leader, it's important that they understand, okay, that a principal makes sometimes decisions, which is because of what's happening in the system. And then maybe the final part, building on what Helen was saying, how do we change systems, or how do we, if you like, navigate them? All right, again, that of a good leader will find ways to do that.
If I may build on that, before joining the SAA, I spent 5 years at the United World College in Changsha, China. it is a very liberal progressive school. And I guess I just can comment a little bit. I went from a very liberal progressive school to a school that I think people would say categorize as more traditional academically driven school in Hong Kong. It was a big transition for me. It was a great learning experience. I wish I could really push forward a lot of the things that I was able to do in a liberal progressive school. But I guess I just want to share with leaders that, yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult when it comes to stakeholder management. Systems change is difficult. How do we identify opportunities, knowing that we're in Asia, for me in the Hong Kong context with Asian parents and the Asian parents' demands? I must say, as a leader, I don't want to beat myself up if I'm not able to push forward things I believe in. But I do think there's always more hanging fruit, and there are opportunities that we can identify to change things. I guess I just want to still recognize that difficulty because, every context is different. And I think the leaders really, when navigating this leadership journey, there are decisions that are difficult to make that might be not 100% aligned, but you just want to encourage everyone one step at a time.
Nooraine, I'm going to throw this one to you. Many schools talk about innovation. We have it in our mission statements. It's on our websites. It's one of the probably most overly used words in education. And yet, our schools still look a lot like they did 30, 40, 50 years ago. So what does meaningful innovation actually look like in a school?
It's been quite a journey for us. I'm going to set some context. When we started in 2005, we were dismissed as an experiment. We started with 29 students and 19 faculty on a farm. Today, we have 1,500 students across 2 campuses and 260 faculty.
They still want the farm?
The farm grew a bit bigger. We got to our campuses, thankfully. But it's quite the challenge to get to the campus given Bangalore's roads or lack thereof. You're not recording that, right? Are you, Mary? But nonetheless. And we also run 4 government schools that we adopted. We've been recognized as India's #1 school in recognition of the innovation, in recognition of what we're doing to transform education in India. And we've done this quite simply by being very purpose-driven. Going back to what Dr. Helen was saying, the why. Why does your school exist? Why did you become an educator? You just have to live it, practice it, and own it. And be very clear with the values of your school. The values guide our thoughts, our words, our action. And by creating a culture which enables that. The culture in Venture is playful, it's entrepreneurial, it's happy. It's also very innovative, resilient, and adaptive. I think what we've done very well as a school is to take advantage of challenges and opportunities in the real world that could have come in the form of a global disruption, like the pandemic. We didn't treat it as business as usual. Whereas other schools and the government thought that, shut down for a month or 2 and everything will go back to normal. We said, hey, this is a great opportunity for us to tear up our existing syllabus, our norms, our practices, and really truly use this as an opportunity to be the school we really want to be it with the pandemic or without. So, we run a Changemaker Challenge on an annual basis. So we invited students to help us reimagine schooling, and we took their ideas, practices, and translated them online by running a number of experiments. We ran trial classes, what a day could look like. We pivoted based on feedback. And that really set up our school now for project-based learning, problem-based learning, choice projects, science beyond curriculum, entrepreneurship program. And this is something that is owned by every single member of our team. The other critical thing is, I think when we innovate, we have to innovate within the system. So when I used to go to policymakers, I'm constantly, on the one hand, we work with them. On the other hand, we butt heads with them. We actually took the government to court when the pandemic took place because they actually banned online learning and banned the collection of fee, which obviously would make it unsustainable for us. So on the one hand, we worked with the government. We took online learning to the government school that we've adopted to say, hey, this is how you can do it. We wrote a white paper and said, irrespective of what you have, learning can and must go on. And the government school that we adopted in 2019, which had 170 students, now has the Inventure way of teaching and learning. And it's ranked number 1 in Karnataka. It has 1,100 students and a wait list of 400 students. I think all of us will be envious of that wait list. So what we did was we demonstrated to the government that this is not just for the elite, this approach. So we worked within the system to try to transform it.
I like something you said there, Nooraine, and it's something we often take for advantage of or take for granted. The role of privilege that we do have in our international schools. We have the capital, the money, the intellectual capital, high net worth families, aspiring students. But maybe just say a little bit more. You're able to take what you're doing in your international school and bring it into public schools as well, and those students are thriving.
It just comes back to, we were talking about values in the first question. It comes back to universal values. Irrespective of your religion, your nationality, these values are integral to who we are as human beings. So I really think we need to shift the focus away from academic or co-curricular excellence to just human excellence. And we have to carry everyone within the system. So if I go back to the pandemic, the reason the government banned online education is because a very powerful school association didn't want to have to deal with this. So they asked the government to ban it. When the government then banned fee collection, we went back to the school association and said, hey, let's work together because this is not going to work for any one of us. So we actually had that person lead the protest against the government. So you need to understand what motivates people, what's their why, and make it happen in order to drive meaningful change through the system. And you just have to work within the ecosystem that you have, whether it's your parents, your teachers, industrialists, corporates, research organizations, higher ed. Change doesn't happen in isolation. And I think a lot of times schools make the mistake of thinking, it's a competition between the top elite schools. If you don't create the conditions, and I realized this only in, I think, about 2018, 2019, when the government started passing regulations which made it impossible for us to exist. So you really need to work on raising the tide for everybody. And yes, we are privileged in terms of the resources, in terms of the know-how that we have. And we just have to recognize that all of humanity has to progress together.
Excellent. Anyone else want to share about innovation, what innovation looks like? Or
May I just add one more thing, please? I think it has to be people first. I see a lot of people turning to technology. Technology can never, ever replace what all of you bring in this room, right? At best, it's an enabler, it's a tool, right? And we've seen a number of initiatives, I think, across the world, and perhaps you'll have an opportunity to talk about that later, but it's people first.
I would just say, or add to this, is that the idea that an initiative has to be grandiose and has to inspire and lead and change is inaccurate. It's that idea of where can I make a change? What can I do that's different? It can happen in an individual classroom by changing the way you greet children when they come in. It can happen in the hallway, in the way you navigate traffic through the hallway. It doesn't always have to be a tech base that's going to cost money, that's going to cost training and time. It can just be trying something new that's different and then working that into the system as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm looking at my colleagues here. EICTA, for example, transformed our quote-unquote code of conduct into, what do we call it now? Pathway, honor code and pathway of success, is it? And Mary started working with research labs, with higher education institutions to take science into the real world for our students and to make it come alive. Absolutely. And I find that, I don't know if you all experience this, but students somehow came back from the pandemic not really making eye contact, not greeting us. And I think the thing that we all made a conscious attempt to do is just to say, hello, good morning, how are you?
excellent, absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about AI. Ron, we know that AI is already changing how students learn and how teachers design assignments or assessments. But what's one or two leadership decisions schools must make in the next 2 years regarding AI?
I think the first one's pretty simple, and that is you have to introduce AI. A lot of people are like, well, I'm going to bury my head. It's going to happen around me. It's going to happen around me with whether I do it or not. So I'm just not going to do it. I think that it's an injustice not to expose your faculty, expose your your schools into the idea that AI exists and that it's going to be here for a long period of time. It's kind of like the idea of a technology of a computer, whether you have a phone or an iPad or a desktop. Everybody needs to know how a computer works. And for me, that sounds like a simple one, but you'd be surprised how many conversations I enter in where we're just not dealing with AI right now. I think the other piece is understand it to be what it is, and that it is a tool. It is not to replace, or maybe it is just to replace certain parts of education. And if we introduce it to the faculty in terms of how it streamlines what they do, what types of advantage they can get from using it, that's great. If we teach them, the faculty, how to use it to write their lesson plans, that's not great. Because now we've kind of created this idea that for students, it's okay to. I think we need to introduce technology. And when we talk about that conversation is how are you going to use it to expand on the skills that we were talking about earlier, the values, the ideas that we have that students need to be successful in this century and beyond, as opposed to how are we going to use it to get through a test or how are we going to use it to get through the curriculum that we need to learn through. So I think that's I think that's the challenge that schools are faced with right now is I think they understand that idea that it's going to be here. Go ahead and embrace it. And when you do, what are those activities and skills that you need to use it for so that you can, and part of it's critical thinking, part of it is developing a sense of streamlining structures and services. These are all things that they can choose to do, but I think they have to make those decisions on their own.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's how do we use AI to go deeper, not just to go faster?
I think from my perspective, the old person,
By a little bit. Probably by a little bit.
Establish fiscal.
I was thinking again about what the keynote was saying. I probably have a slightly different perspective on AI. Because I think from the limited amount of time I've used AI, it's actually helped you to think more.
Yes.
If you actually pause, exactly as you said. So I think my message, and it is to school leaders we have, is use it, but use it to enable you to think. Keep asking the questions, not just one, and it pops out, but use it to really think. And that's how I've certainly found it very from Eddie.
About 2 years ago, two months ago, not 2 years, 2 months ago, I did a TEDx talk about this topic. If you're interested, it's online for TEDx Teen How Women. It's a talk that really just it's a very simple message. I think that there's too much focus in schools, just tracking the use of AI. Plagiarism, turn it in, AI detector. All the teachers are trying to detect it. Are they using it? Are they using their brains or not? I think there's a lot of focus on that. I think there needs to be a shift in focus in terms of how we can leverage AI technology, automation and whatnot to empower the students to actually do projects, to actually take action to make a difference in the world. Because AI technology unleashes so many possibilities that weren't possible before. How do we as educators actually ignite their interests and passions, expose them to different things in experiential learning, service learning, and whatnot, to find something that they care about? Because if they care about something, they'll be self-motivated to leverage the technology to make a difference. And I think that there needs to be more thinking and more deliberate work in that area.
Excellent. I think, Shirla, that puts a lot of onus, though, on the teacher to have to do more. And I think as teachers, we get tired of always do more, one more thing that we have to do. How do we keep teachers motivated, in this pace of change in education when it feels so relentless?
In fact, I think that the pace of change is so fast that, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of classrooms still look the same. A lot of practices still look the same. In fact, when it comes to the teaching profession, your own classroom, in fact, what is happening in the world probably doesn't need to concern you. In fact, I think that the question is more about how do we motivate the teachers to make sure that what they're doing is properly preparing our students for the present and the future. How do we get them to get into the mindset? My doctoral research was about cultivating teacher innovative behavior. And very much, that innovation doesn't have to be, like Juan said earlier, it doesn't have to be a big edtech creation, right? But it's really about the day-to-day. And I really recommend all leaders to read Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety. How do you create that school culture where it is psychologically safe for teachers to do something different, to be more innovative? How do you reframe failure? There are different types of failure, and of course, we need accountability. It doesn't mean that you can always fail and all is good, right? That's not what I'm saying. But to be able to distinguish different types of failure from simple failures, lab safety, right? That's something that you should not compromise. There's simple safety issues that you've got to follow the rules, and that's a simple failure, to intelligent failures that you should be encouraging in your school environment, that they're not scared to experiment, for example, on the curriculum front. How do you create that environment? And then one point I also want to add as leader, how do you yourself model that you yourself embrace failure? Do you talk about things that have not been working out? Do you tell everyone, yeah, we tried that. Okay, that wasn't great. So let's get the feedback, let's iterate, and let's try again. I think leaders really can make a huge difference to embrace failure openly, publicly. I know it's difficult for me in terms of my cultural background. It's taken a long time for me to be more comfortable with that. But I do think that that really helps with creating a school culture that is more innovative.
It goes back to the question is, what is the purpose of school? And it really is not to prepare kids for it's not to prepare kids for what our current realities are outside of high school or middle school, because a lot of our kids are actually 5. And the world's going to look a whole hell of a lot different in 20 years. So what are the skills and developmental things that we need to bring to them? Resilience being a big one of those. The ability to question, the ability to understand and seek more deeper learning. Those will get us to where those kids can be successful in 2040 and 2050, no matter what's thrown at them. Because it won't be AI. I mean, so again, we'll date ourselves. I remember the introduction of the calculator, and I was a math teacher. It was scary. And all of a sudden, the kids are going to have all the answers at their fingertips. Not true. Not true.
And to set aside the slide ruler.
Didn't have a slide ruler, but I mean, when it got into everybody's hands, it got scary.
Very true.
We weren't allowed in here.
There you go.
Nooraine, Shirla talked about how we motivate teachers, but let's look at leadership and what are the leadership qualities that really matter most when we're leading through this uncertainty, rapid change, and innovation? You mentioned values. How would you expand on that? What are the leadership qualities that we have to have?
I really look at it as the 4 Ps. One goes back to purpose. You'd have to constantly ensure that your why is aligned with the schools, the community that you serve, the why of it. It absolutely goes back to values. I will go back to it every single time. It also is passion. You've got to own it. You have to live it, sleep it, eat it, right? And it comes down to culture at the end of the day, and culture goes top down. It's not bottom up. So it's really up to us as leaders to drive that change through the system. And as you said, it's very important to create that culture where there's psychological safety to experiment, to innovate, to try different things. And a lot of times the nudge will come from the top. So when we took that decision during the pandemic, that we'll just drown out the noise and we'll just go ahead and do what we think we need to do as a school. And it was a big risk that we took because the government at that time was saying, don't go online. So we actually worked with another third-party vendor of ours and said, okay, can you run these other classes while we go to court and contest this ban? And, we organized this protest and so on. So I think the team basically saw that we were doing everything possible to ensure that it was business as usual. And we communicated with parents, we communicated with teachers, we communicated with students, we made sure everybody is okay. Like when somebody came down with COVID, we sent them food home, we sent them oxygen cylinders home, whatever it took. So really you have to live this. It's also about play, right? You have to create that environment where it's playful. It's about potential. It's about asking yourself this question, what do I want to learn? What have I learned? What do I want others to learn? And really about bringing out the best in every single person. And the list goes on. You have to be adaptive, you have to be innovative, you have to be resilient, you have to be entrepreneurial. But none of this happens in isolation. You have to create the word you used, that ecosystem of trust or respect. Yes, there are KPIs, yes, there's scorecards, but you have to have honest conversations around them. Sometimes as a leader, you have to be directive. Other times you have to mentor, you have to coach. But whatever you do, you have to recognize that we're dealing with people, and people have their own baggages, if you like. They have their own life histories, and you just have to carry everybody with you. And as you said, it's not easy. It is incredibly challenging. But the outcome, if you get it right, is something which is incredibly fulfilling and well worth going after.
I would say the one thing we skirted over, Howard, was the idea that your question earlier, maybe not this one, but the one before, was about how much we're putting on teachers. And then we talked a little bit about well-being, but we really were talking about children and their well-being. And I think it's important that we create, and again, something that in my community we get a lot of ribbing about is a lot of days off. Because parents are like, oh, when are they in school? They're out every Wednesday or out. Yes, because that's when our teachers reflect. That's when our teachers plan. That's when our teachers have time to actually take care of themselves a little bit. So putting in wellness programs for faculty, because they're teaching, you could not pay me enough money to go back into a classroom because it's that much harder than my job.
Yes, absolutely. I'd agree. I have one more question for the panel, and then I want to open it up to you, the audience members, to ask a question. You have great access to these wonderful leaders who have lots of experience, and I challenge you to try to stump them, or just to probe a little bit deeper if you have a question for them. If we have about 10 minutes that we can fill that up, and if you don't have any questions, I do have another question that we can go into. But I really want to make this into some dialogue as well. So think about that. I'm going to do one more question for Arnett and anyone else who wants to answer, and then we'll open it up to the audience. I'll come down with the microphone. I'm hoping that our panel has inspired people who are not leaders to join leadership. Hopefully we haven't discouraged you thinking, oh my God, I'll never want to do that. We all know we don't want to go back into the classroom though. But Arnett, your work with the Leadership Academy, I'm sure you look at this. What advice would you give educators who are looking to make that move into leadership, into formal leadership, and when they're already doing leadership now?
Yeah, I think that we think of three main areas. One is mentors with an S. Often people talk about mentor, but actually I think it's more than one. When I reflect on, I had different mentors that could support me in different situations, different circumstances, etc. And it's important to seek out, reach out for those people that not necessarily within your school, externally, can be now across the world, etc. So that's point number one. Point number two is read about leadership. All right, we've heard all about reading, the importance of actually or attending programs, courses. Obviously, I'm going to say that when you're School Leadership Academy, but doing that, really reading and looking at theory, thinking about how you can apply that theory into leadership. That's point number two. And point number three is a word we've heard a lot of from the panel: courage. When I look at when I reflect my own background, I was brought up in rural Hampshire in a small village post office which my mum and dad were running. Okay, unfortunately, my dad's passed away now, but I don't think he could quite believe that this is what I'm doing now. Right? And I'm not saying I took this bold courage. All happened really step by step. It wasn't I said, I'm going to be principal, right? But step by step, things evolved. I guess gradually took some baby steps. It gradually moved on. So I think that courage.
I would say use AI. I mean, like as I'm thinking, we're all four of us are very different type of people and different leaders in different scenarios. And you could actually type in who you think you are and what you want to be and what your philosophies are, and then get your reading that would help you grow in your areas. Because I think that a lot of times there's no formula. I mean, and you will never hear me quote Liziani or anybody because I can't remember his name. But the important thing is you've read all these books, you have all this concept knowledge. What are you going to do with it? Use AI, help it flesh out who you are.
I would say in the same way we want experiential learning for our students, just roll up your sleeves and try it. Find an opportunity, find a challenge you want to solve, and go after it.
If I may build on what Arnett said, find mentors outside of education, read outside of education. I think that's really beneficial. For me, I spent a number of years in finance, and I think that still up to this day, I draw so many lessons from the finance corporate world. And I think that for us education leaders, we can learn a lot of new things and get new ideas from looking outside of education.
Excellent. Good. Let's open it up to the audience. Wow, we've got lots of questions. 1, 2, 3, and then 4, then a 5.
Thank you. I'm Alex from YK Pao, Shanghai. I have a question about leading in uncertainty, but it has to do with teacher recruitment. It's very difficult now. I don't know if you find the same thing, to find the right fit for the school. And there are many things going on around the world. So how's your approach to that when you're just looking for the right fit, for your school, given all the complexities that we currently face?
Who are you directing that towards? Sorry.
Anyone.
The direction was we were supposed to direct.
Okay. So let's talk about then Ron. Yeah, you just do that.
Great. Because I was so focused on who you're asking, I wasn't listening. Let me try to rephrase your question, make sure I had it right. The teacher recruitment, how do we go about finding the right people to match our community? And it's a very good one. Again, I think that from my perspective, we're very fortunate that word of mouth brings a lot of good people to us. And that's from our teachers. Our teachers say, I know, like we have 4th grade opening already, it's almost filled because we have 3 people who said, I know somebody, and they're all different people. So we can go ahead and interview those people, find out that they're a match to our community and our needs. I think that also knowing who your school is and what do they really need. I don't mean like the big philosophy that sits on the board docket. If you're looking for a 4th grade teacher, what are you looking for? Are you looking for, because in this team, we have a team of 10, what does that look like in that team? And then have your teachers involved in that process to make sure they're not finding somebody like them, but somebody who will complement their skill sets and develop. So I think those are all components that we do when we do hiring. It is complicated. And in terms of, we start early, we start in September for the following year. A lot of that becomes our structures that we put in place to make sure that we know who's leaving as far in advance as possible. We're always surprised at the end. There's always somebody who says, oh, I decided not to come back, whatever. But at least then we have the mass pieces taken care of. Does that help?
For the second question?
Hi, I'm Michael Yip, Canada International School. I've got a couple of, I wanted to apply a lens of gender, looking at the changing world, gender in particular, and this question's for Nooraine and Rob. In education, girls tend to outperform boys. It's just a fact. But in the outside world, males tend to outperform females. How are we beginning to work with that within school? And in particular, that perfectionist streak, I think that you were talking about possibly, and trying to find the right balance of that and how that can be balanced better.
Wow.
And then also within that as well, anything that we're doing at the moment with the rise of online misogyny and how as leaders we can be overt in tackling online misogyny within our street crews.
Oh, you said your name first? Yeah. Well, so for me, I would actually push a little bit on your assumptions, because my experience is that not that women aren't outperforming men in the workplace, it's that women are underrepresented in leadership positions in the workplace. And that's a systematic piece. So within the ecosystem of work, what can we do then to make sure that we're highlighting what success looks like and how that's achieved? So I would push there first, and I kind of will let her answer that.
We have 12 people in our management team, leadership team, all women. And it's not that we don't want men on our team. Anybody who wants to come to Bangor, please feel free to apply, male or female. And the culture is just so different. It's more nurturing, it's more human. But I find that, how do I put this in a politically correct way? That I find that, with men, they're just far more transactional. They believe in themselves that much more, whereas women, that research study which says that when men look at a job, irrespective, they can do 1 out of 10 things. They're like, oh yeah, I got this, I can do it. Whereas I think as women, we tend to doubt ourselves that much more. So we are just inherently different. And I don't think we're going to solve it by saying everybody is equal. We deserve equality of opportunity, yes. But the fact is we're inherently different. And whether it's education or corporate or politics, we just have to recognize the difference and make sure we have a good balance in leadership teams or as well as in the overall workforce.
Great.
Let's do Shirla and say yes.
At VSA, this is our 4th year running VSA Women's Week. This is something that we hear about a lot in terms of gender issues. In fact, I'll just quickly mention, even yesterday, we had the head of public policy at Meta, Hai Kong, come to our school to talk about Meta and the policies. For example, against image-based violence against women, to share with our students what the company itself is doing to reduce the misogyny and what is going on online. And then for us, and of course across the curriculum, but every year we actually have a whole week dedicated to having women who are in public policy, women who are in different walks of life share with our students the importance of talking about these issues, the importance of talking about microaggressions on a daily basis, and actually working with our teachers to talk about this. Because a lot of times, actually, teachers don't even examine their own assumptions about female and male students. And that is actually infiltrated in the instruction that they do every day. So I do think that this is something, thank you for the question. I think this is extremely important.
So I just want to add, so at our school, when our students see that it's a female-dominated leadership, they actually learn from that. And our student council is open, it's a co-ed school, and our student council has more female leaders than male leaders. And they are going on to university, they're going on to the workplace, and they are creating change. So I take a lot of joy from that, and I can only hope that this will spread.
Great. Well, our next question through.
Okay, so this is a question for Nooraine. I was really interested that you mentioned play, actually probably 2 or 3 times. And this is more of a serious panel, right? The topic is uncertainty. So this really struck me, especially because I work at Pioneer Academics, and I know your school, it's recognized for, I guess my assumption was more on rigor. I think it's a very strong school. So it's really interesting to me that you focused on play, and I'd like to kind of hear you share more about how you believe that play enables for your IOs.
Okay, I think first of all, the very basis is you need to be happy. You need to want to go to school, whether you're a student, a teacher, or a leader. So an environment which is more, if you like, more relaxed, lets you be more authentic as a person and express yourself as a person, I think really is invaluable. I think a lot of times we're too focused on saying the right things, doing the right thing. But the fact is, at the end of the day, we all are human, right? So I turned to Ron and said, I hope I wasn't too politically incorrect with that response. So it really comes down to, so if you look at a typical school in India, kids will be sitting down in class, ready for the class. They're not walking around, they're not talking. When they go from one class to the other, they ask to walk with their, hands folded or finger on the lip. In venture is not that at all. It's somewhat chaotic for somebody who comes in from the outside, but I think that's what enables us to be the kind of people we need to be. I think a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the world today are created because we are expected to be compliant. So compliance is not going to solve the problems that we're experiencing, because the approaches that we used have actually created those problems. So when I say play, I mean not necessarily being compliant. And also you want to give children a safe ecosystem in which they can do something which, they mess up, it's okay. You've got the scaffolding and you can help them course correct, because I think later in life, if you make mistakes, because you suddenly go from a very restricted environment to the wider world and nobody's watching, then the consequences of messing up are much higher. And when I say play, I mean freedom to try different things. So this year, when we found that more and more students were going off our school meal plan, for example, we said, and Bangalore traffic is not great. We find that students spend 3 to 4 hours a day just coming to school and going back. So the last thing you want for parents to do is to actually prepare food and send them. So turned to Ektan, who loves food, and said, hey, can you do something with this? So she went out and she spoke to students. She ran focus group discussions with parents. She tried different menus. She tried different ways in which the food was presented. She shared information about the food. So in that sense, she was playing with the menu. She was playing with different options, taste palettes and so on and so forth, that eventually we arrived at something which everybody wanted. And if along the way she failed per se, it's okay. Because at the end of the day, we have to own it. We have to own the decisions and know enough to course correct. And that's where your purpose and your values come in as a school. I hope that answers your question.
Great.
Thank you.
We're already over time, but I have one more question. You will be our last question for today.
Thank you. I'm sorry to keep you, but I hope it's a meaningful question. So much of what I heard from today's panel, I'm paraphrasing, came down to the word agency. And even in the last idea around play, being able to have scaffolding and support to make our own decisions and to try things out and to fail forward. So this is a question for Dr. Shirla. I heard you when you were mentioning your TED Talk. I jotted that down. I shared it with some kids already that might benefit from it. But around that time, you were mentioning how AI can be a superpower and actually can create new learning opportunities. It can do new things, more than just being a tool that does the work for us. Maybe you might say it does the work with us. And I wonder also, coming back to the earlier idea of innovation, I heard from our panel that there's this overused word in our teacher language. We overuse the word innovation. And I wonder if we might even start to look to the future and say that AI is actually perhaps going to have a level of sentience one day in the future. And I wonder if we might start to anticipate that and say, in that innovative mindset, if AI does have a level of sentience, maybe it deserves a level of respect. We start shifting the language away from tool into the language of collaborator or guest in our classroom. And so that was just sort of the framing for the actual question. What I wanted to ask you was, what things might leaders do that accidentally betray student agency?
If I may respond to your earlier comments first, I think that's fascinating, and thank you for bringing that, the idea of co-intelligence. Okay? I think there's still a lot of debate about the agentic properties of AI. I don't agree that AI is a tool. I think it's beyond a tool. I don't agree with that framing of AI as a tool because I don't think there's a capital there. I do think that AI can do a lot more than that because of the AI agent properties of AI. So I think thank you for bringing that up. Again, that's very debatable, but how do we prepare students for that framing of AI? I think is really important. In fact, I know lots of leaders right now, including my own husband, that is obsessed with OpenClaw and getting OpenClaw to do lots of things for him, which worries me, but that is the reality right now. In terms of what leaders are doing that might be against promoting student agency right now, I think, that's a great question. I think it's a matter of trust. A lot of times we don't trust our students enough. Yeah, sometimes, when we say we let go of the driving seat, and those opportunities, you realize, goodness, how students can do that. But there's a balance, of course. And I'm in secondary school. And I think there's a difference between primary going up to secondary. And all of us can be more mindful about the developmental progression. When do we interview more? When do we pull back, right? I think that's something that we can do more. Well, I come from a whole school, and I think that there's more work to be done there. But really, it comes down to trust and letting the students really surprise you. Going back to the idea of failing forward. Again, if we don't pull back more and let them have that agency, then how do we expect them to learn? Again, the caveat is that I do want to say that I'm very aware that we're in Hong Kong. The cultural aspect, the cultural context is extremely important. That is difficult because failure, really growing up, as a Chinese girl, and now, in our culture, failure is the worst thing ever. Right? How do you reframe that? Again, sorry, but I would be repetitive, but really is very important. Then we can much better foster that student agency. Thank you.